get what we call feet safe, you then have to go to a tanker for approximately an hour, gassing up and topping off your airplane to go back to the carrier, because it's another 500 miles or so from there to get back to the carrier. In that time, there's a tendency or a possibility to relax, and your adrenaline level goes down. However, you still have to land on the carrier, and that's always the final thing that a Navy pilot has to do. So the relaxation lasts for a little while, but that can also put you into a lackadaisical mode, knowing that you still have to land on the carrier. You've got to get that adrenaline pumped back up again.
One of the most versatile assets in the military arsenal is the aircraft carrier. With the carrier, 60 of the world's premier attack and air-to-air fighters can be on station, ready to project power at a moment's notice. This mobile airfield can make the difference for a military commander, from keeping the sea lanes open to supporting the strategic initiatives of war.
Out here, we have the carrier to launch. We can move the carrier around to different places. We have a lot of flexibility in that we've got all types of aircraft co-located right here in the air wing. For different types of missions, we can pull people together in one spot, get them all briefed up within a couple of hours and get on the way. Assure that sometimes very difficult because you have different aircraft based in different places. The coordination out here, for many cases, is much easier because we have everybody here within 1,000 feet on the carrier, and we can pull it all together and get over there in a hurry.
When it pulls out of port, it's a full-up airfield, full-up round, ready to not only defend itself, but ultimately, and its primary mission is to project power. All the ordnance is there. It doesn't have to be shipped over. All the aircraft are there, all the air crew, all the fuel, everything required to project power at a moment's notice.
Typical air wing on a carrier is around 60 aircraft. It's made up of a couple of F-14 squadrons, a couple of F-18 squadrons, one A-6. A couple of carriers have two A-6 squadrons on them, an EA-6B squadron, an E-2 squadron, and an S-3 squadron, and then the SH-3 Hilo squadron. The mission of the F-14 is the Navy's premier fighter. Primarily, it's a fighter first and provides air superiority and fleet air defense for the carrier battle group. The principal mission for the F-18 is power projection ashore. We train equally to the fighter mission and the air-to-ground mission, but I'd say our major emphasis would be dropping bombs, and the air-to-air would come in more of a self-escort role, to where we don't have to have a slew of fighters going in with us. We can take care of ourselves, basically.
All right, it's a two-place, obviously, side-by-side, all-weather attack aircraft. Carry roughly 8 tons of ordnance, which is a good bit more than some other aircraft in theater.
The airborne controllers are all in the E-2C, the Hawkeye, and those guys are, and the F-14, F-18 guys all work together fairly closely for the air defense role. The EA-6B Prowler is a jamming platform. It provides some electronic surveillance and some electronic jamming of different frequency bands. The SH-3 on the ship is kind of a jack of all trades. His primary mission was anti-submarine. It's our SAR platform. If anybody goes down, the SH-3 is probably going to be who's going to pick you up.
I picked S-3s out of the training command. It's like a chess game. You go out there and you look for an enemy submarine, and there's a lot of satisfaction going out there and finding the guy submerged and tracking him, having the ability to, should he become a threat, to take him out, should that need arise at any given time.
Omar Zone, enter flight text crash 1125 without delay.
Hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean, individual air squadrons will come together to form a complete air wing. In the deserts of Nevada, pilots will train for the missions that will give the carrier the power it will ultimately project from the sea.
The carrier air wing team is something that once you're on a deployment, it has to work together good in order to accomplish its mission. In preparing for that, the air wing is generally broken down into its individual squadrons. They do unit level training so that they're on the step with their individual mission. The air wing will get together and start doing air wing training, which culminates with a detachment out to Fallon, Nevada, where everyone gets together, all the different warfare specialties, and they integrate the air wing itself. Out at Fallon, you'll plan different types of simulated type missions. The entire air wing, the F/A-18s, the A-6s, the F-14s, the A-6s, the E-2s, the S-3s, everyone will go through their little part in attacking whatever your assigned mission that day or for that particular strike is. They'll plan it, play it out, and then they'll go fly it on a range. It has the capability for the air crew to debrief, to go back and look at what they've done. The air wing can get some idea of how everything's playing together. Fallon is a remote area with a lot of airspace. We have a supersonic area out there, and it's over land. That's one thing a lot of Navy guys don't get a lot of practice with, particularly East Coast Navy, is most of our flying's out over the water. So it's a chance to look at some overland work with radars and terrain masking and those type things. Following that, the air wing will move onto the ship, and then you start into both shipboard operations, and that advances on up into some battle group operations where all the different other ships kind of join together, and the whole Navy team, surface, subsurface, and aviation teams all get together to form an effective battle group. You have to train a lot of different scenarios as far as parts of the world. I mean, a typical East Coast cruise could have the carrier in the Med off the coast of Lebanon, say. Next, a week later, it could be off the coast of Libya. Then it could come around and go up into the North Atlantic and be working off the fjords of Norway.
At sea, from the expanse of the desert to the close confines of the aircraft carrier, the differences in size, space, and intensity are pronounced. And for the pilot, the transition is always dramatic.
Only since we're down below for so long, we don't get on deck unless we're going to fly. First thing I notice when I come on deck is just the intense wind and all the activity. It's like a whole different world up there. So you get up and you just get this feeling like I'm gearing up to fly. It's something, and it's just a great feeling. You're walking along the flight deck and there's carts moving all around, and people are towing aircraft, getting them in their position for launch, and it's a lot of activity. You're on board, and what you're doing is the whole reason the carrier's there. So it's kind of it's a really awesome feeling. I mean, everybody up there, in a sense, is working so that you can get off the jet and go drop your bombs. Even all the guys on there, 5,500 guys on the ship, and it's to help you get in your jet and go launch your bombs, and it's definitely a good feeling.
worst thing with the flight deck is that it's real noisy. It can be slick. The ship's moving through the water, making its own way, and likes to turn into the wind. So you've got 30 knots of wind over the flight deck. So you've just got natural wind out over there blowing you all the time, and you've got turning aircraft. You've got your ear protection and all that on, so you really don't hear a lot other than just engines turning. So you could turn around and walk right into an intake of an airplane, or have an airplane turn with your back to, when you're not facing it, turn its exhaust to you, blow you over, or knock you off balance. You've got E2s that have turning props, the helos when their rotors are turning. All that stuff's all extremely dangerous, and the people learn real fast that you don't take anything for granted, and that you keep your head on a swivel when you're walking around looking, taking care of your buddy, because if a guy doesn't see something going on, you'll always see a guy come grab a guy to kind of make sure he sees that a guy's going to turn his exhaust to blow on him or something.
Coming back, it's not only just land on the ship, which is obviously one of the hardest things to do in aviation, but once you're on the flight deck, taxiing around with that many aircraft is still a possibility where guys have gone over the side just by a director not directing properly, or the aircraft sliding due to the fact that the non-skid, which is a gritty paint that we have on the flight deck, sometimes gets worn and can't hold the tires.
Three fighters deliver the carrier's punch: the F-14 Tomcat, the FA-18 Hornet, and the A-6 Intruder. The only single-seater in the carrier arsenal, the FA-18 Hornet is a versatile fighter that flies both the air-to-air and the air-to-ground attack mission. The A-6 Intruder, now over 25 years old, is the stalwart all-weather attacker for the Navy. The F-14, aging but vigorous, flies the huge AIM-54 missile and provides air defense for the fleet in the air-to-air role.
The best thing the F-14 has going for it is that it has a real powerful radar. It's its own airborne tanker, carries a lot of fuel, can stay airborne a good amount of time, and it's got a lot of performance. It's the fastest airplane the Navy has flying. The F-14 is the only platform flying that carries the AIM-54 Phoenix missile, which is a long-range air-to-air missile, and it gives the F-14 a lot of capability that other aircraft don't have. Underneath the nose of the F-14's the TCS, which is the television camera set, which it's basically gives the airplane magnification capability, a contrast type of lock to lock on targets at range and magnify them and ID what they are. The most current series of the F-14 is the F-14D. The F-14D, the big improvement there is with the weapon system. It's a lot more digital technology incorporated into the weapon system. It has the higher thrust GE engines in it. It has a lot of different sensors in it that give it a lot more capability. As decreed by the Secretary of the Navy, the future of naval aviation is the F-18 Hornet, and there will be some version of that probably developed that will end up replacing the F-14 and the current F-18s we have. The AX is envisioned as the replacement for the A6, and so future carriers, future air wings into the 21st century should have some complement of F-18 type aircraft and AX type aircraft. the F-18 is far and away a better aircraft than the F-14 in many different ways. We have better avionics, much better maneuverability and thrust to weight. We're smaller in size, so our radar cross-section is not as great. We don't have smoking engines, and the F-18 is really no match for the F-14. We can take care of those guys very easily, and it's definitely no bearing on them as pilots. It's just their aircraft, what they're working with. Now, with the new A+ that they have and those engines, it brings it much closer to the maneuverability and thrust to weight of the F-18. And I have to say that a good F-14 guy and an A+, you know, might be able to give an F-18 guy a good show.
What's really nice about the F-18 is it can protect itself. It's extremely survivable, very, very high-speed airplane, very survivable, and it's got a swing roll. You either drop bombs or you're a fighter guy. Another part of it that's very, very good, it's easy to maintain. So when you come back and land the airplane, you put gas in it, it's ready to launch again.
The F-18 is a very user-friendly airplane. The way it was designed, they took into consideration a lot of the pilot's inputs. What do we want to see in an airplane if we were the guys flying it? When they designed it, they took a lot of lessons learned from the F-15, the F-14, and the F-16. And it was basically a good jet to begin with when coming from the YF-17. It's very maneuverable. It's got good thrust performance. It's got good altitude performance, high and low. Takes off and lands at a short distance. It's got a fairly good short field capability.
The big advantages that we had putting the F-18 into service were, now you have the air-to-air capability that the A-7 Corsair did not have. It has much better platform for bombing. You know, it's a state-of-the-art cockpit, computerized bombing solutions and all that. So it's just a lot better technology. Plus, it has the dual role. So that's basically it.
The F-18 gets launched off the ship. The cat shot off the carrier is a hands-off catapult shot. They have little hand holes where the pilot will put his right hand, and the flight control system's all fly-by-wire. It's all pre-programmed, and the pilot needs to stay out of the loop, so the airplane will basically rotate itself and fly itself off on a normal catapult shot.
Mission of the A6 is all-weather attack. We can strike a target a long way away. We can do it single ship. We can do it multi-ship if we need to. Generally, flying at night in bad weather will be a single ship. We can do that down to an altitude as low as 200 feet.
The A6 is an all-weather bomber. It's the only one that the Navy owns. So we can fly in the rain. We fly mostly at night. And the cloud cover really doesn't affect us that much. We use our radar to target in the target area, and so it doesn't hurt us that badly. We can be a little more accurate if we can use our FLIR for detection and ranging. We can be a little bit more accurate, but the weather really doesn't affect us that much. The weather only hurts us getting our strike groups together.
The A6 also flies the tanker mission on occasion. Like I said, there's always a lot of activity, and you have to, follow a plane around if he's getting to be a low state after he's had a few approaches, and you have to position yourself almost perfectly so that if he bolters again, then he can look up and you're right where, he's expecting to be, which is at the 1 to 2 o'clock position. Tanking can be, this is one of those things where once you get good at it, we like to kind of press the bubble and see how quickly we can get in the basket and with how much flair we can do it. But let's say you've had a 14-day layover in Palma, Spain, and you haven't touched the stick, and now you're back in the cockpit again. It can be a flail wreck, snakes in the cockpit, and you're trying to get in and out of the basket, and all your buddies are watching you out there hanging off the A6's wing, and they're laughing because you can't get in the basket. But normally it's a pretty easy evolution, and we kind of enjoy it. The BN is obviously, like I said, sitting right next to me, and I can look at him when we're flying. We can talk back and forth. It's kind of comfortable to see the guy sitting right next to you as opposed to just hearing a voice over your intercom system and knowing he's sitting behind you.
naval air combat, the cat launch, the enemy engagement, and finally, the recovery back on deck. All in all, one of the most demanding missions in military aviation.
The way a mission would start on the ship is you would end up briefing your mission specifics with the other aircrew, other aircraft that are going with you. Then you would go into maintenance control, and the maintenance chief at the desk there would present you with the aircraft discrepancy book. You would go through the book, look at all the, saying everything that is safe for flight has been serviced. Any problems that the last aircrew or last few aircrews have had with the airplane would all be documented, and what was done to fix that, and then any other outstanding problems with the airplane. Then you would leave maintenance control, go up on the flight deck where you would meet your plane captain. The Air Force calls it a crew chief. The Navy calls it a plane captain.
Approaching the aircraft, I'm just taking a general look around, just to get an overall feel. Okay, is there, how do the tires look? Just kind of a general. There's my bird, and do I see any glaring errors before I get down and get into the detail of the pre-flight?
We'll pre-flight our jets probably in about 10 minutes. And then generally the startup is 30 minutes prior to the scheduled launch. So we'll be in our jets and be ready to start 30 minutes prior to the scheduled launch. 30 minutes prior, the air boss, as he's affectionately known, calls away the start for all the jets that are involved in that launch. Everybody starts up, does all their pre-flight checks in the jet, and gets ready to go. And then there's sort of a ballet on the flight deck, if you will, as the planes get situated.
If the ship's out in heavy seas where it's rocking and rolling, you can feel the motion quite a bit, and it's actually sometimes pretty exciting to try to taxi when the airplane's pitching and rolling.
I'd be firing on one of the bow catapults on the starboard side, known as Catapult 1. The catapult officer will be situated on my left side, about my 10 o'clock position. I would notice there would be a couple of the catapult crew running out from underneath the plane. They've just hooked up our holdback fitting and our tow link that will attach us to the shuttle, which actually pulls us down the catapult. As they run out, the catapult officer will be looking up and down the flight deck to make sure that everything's clear. He'll indicate that we should go into tension, as it's called. I'll make sure our hydraulic pressure is good, our oil pressure is good. The catapult officer will be still standing out there waiting for my salute, which indicates that we're ready to go as a crew. I'll wipe out the controls, move the stick to touch all four corners, move the rudders back and forth to make sure that the controls aren't binding, make sure we have no other warnings or cautions that indicate there's a problem with the airplane. When all that's complete, the BN is ready to go. I'll look over to the catapult officer, salute him. He'll return my salute. Once again, look up and down the deck to make sure that all is clear, holding the throttles up at full power, and I'll notice he'll lean down, touch the deck, indicating that we're going to be shot. A couple seconds later, I'll feel the acceleration, and it's just the greatest ride in the world. My first two cruises, I was on the Coral Sea, which was an old carrier, and it only had 3 catapults, and the type of the catapult was a lot different than the ones on the Nimitz-class carriers, in that you got all of your acceleration at once. So when you get it all at once, all the acceleration is right there, bang. It's like being shot out of a cannon. It was mind-boggling, put your eyeballs back in the back of your head. You had to almost uncage your head as you climbed out. It's a split second there as you're going down the stroke. Obviously, you can feel that it's good, and if it's not good, really you can check your airspeed right at the end. Rotate to the proper attitude. Raise your landing gear. Look at your VSI. If you're climbing. All right, continue on with the mission. If you're descending, we have a oral warning when our radar altimeter goes off below a preset altitude. If that happens with negative VSI, then negative vertical speed, then you're not climbing away. You have to eject. It happens like that.
that dreaded cold cat when you're getting shot off the front end, that you need a certain airspeed for you to go flying or to even keep the airplane flying. Maybe they can, you're getting shot off the front end at 60 feet, so you've got maybe 50 feet you can play with there.
I've had the kind that you go off the end and you drop 30 or 40 feet, and you realize it's not a complete cold because you felt the kick and you're used to that, but at the same time it wasn't what you thought, and it scares you.
We don't know who the enemies are anymore these days. You don't know, since you don't know who the enemy is, you don't know what kind of capabilities are out there. We've got the ability to climb up high and stay high above most of the threat, which most airplanes cannot do that these days. And we can deliver ordnance fairly accurately from high altitude, stay out of the high threat area down there in the AAA. And once we whittle down some of that AAA and some of those surface-to-air missiles, then of course we can get lower and deliver point-blank range on tanks and artillery pieces.
In Desert Storm, we flew 3 basic missions. The mission into Iraq generally was to escort attack aircraft, either F-18 or A-6s, or as a collateral mission was to fly the TARPS pod, which was the Tactical Airborne Reconnaissance pod, and to get some tactical reconnaissance, post-strike damage, and try to pick up just some other possible targets. For a fleet air defense, we did provide combat air patrol missions for the battle group in both the Red Sea and the North Arabian Sea. A typical mission, a strike into Iraq would last approximately 5 hours, with a couple of them lasting as long as 6 hours. And most of that was made up of launching off the carrier, flying and rendezvousing with some tankers, and waiting to ingress. You'd spend maybe 30 to 45 minutes into Iraq, and then come back and had to refuel again, and airborne refueling, and then proceed back to the carrier, and then wait for your recovery time at the carrier.
You always have to think the worst situation. When you go up on this strike tonight, he is going to have a trap set for you with fighters. He's going to have all the SAMs firing at you, and you have to set it up for the worst case, and you can never really relax. So as far as being lucky, I think that it's more a professional competence of the tactics we're using and what we're doing.
I was the far right-hand Hornet in my group, and was responsible for lookout at that direction. Saw a flash down on the ground in a cloud of sand, and we'd always been briefed about what it would look like. But first thing I thought of was, hey, there's a flare being shot. And then it started to rise up. And as it was coming up, I saw it begin to pull lead on my airplane. And knowing that most of their SAMs have proportional navigation, I realized it was tracking me. So not knowing whether it was an infrared SAM or a radar SAM, I put up both chaff and flares, put the SAM on my beam so there was no closure or opening from the SAM, and all of a sudden it was no longer pulling lead on me. It started to drift behind my airplane. Actually passed through my altitude and detonated above my altitude.
People were calling them out left and right, smoke on the left, smoke on the right, and you could look down and see them coming right up at you. It was incredible. I'd never seen anything like it.
It'd be wrong to say it wasn't just a little bit terrifying to know somebody shooting at you. But at the same time, you reach a point where you do the same thing you've trained to do all the time. And I won't say you block it out, you recognize it's there and you recognize the risk, but you go ahead and do what you went to do. We're pretty careful about particularly telling the young guys like Jim that there's a trade-off between getting the mission done and taking the risk. And we try to teach our guys not to take an unacceptable risk. And in fact, a lot of the missiles that are fired are not guided. And a lot of them that are fired aren't aimed at you, even though it may look like it. But if you really think you're in danger, then you may not drop the bombs right then. You may make a maneuver. You may do whatever's required to try to defeat that, and then try to get on to do your job.
Navy primarily would work the F-14 F-14 as a Section or 2 aircraft. You know, when available, some missions you would work as a division or 4 plane, but routine missions off the ship, you'd work as a section within squadrons. There may be another section from the other squadron going to a different station. Routinely, we work with our Aegis cruisers, destroyers, and use them to provide early pointers as to where the hostile aircraft are, and then basically we put our radars on them and other sensors and acquire contact.
We normally like to deploy on a strike mission in a 4-plane type formation. We like to call it a battle box. The reason for that is there's a better lookout doctrine. We are able to support each other better in that kind of formation than in a 2-plane, which just isn't enough aircraft in an enemy environment.
Popeye and I launched during a day hop, and probably about 3 miles after we took off, we had a fire light, and that's an automatic engine shutdown. So we had to climb up overhead and shut the engine down and set up for single engine. Because it was blue water, you know, normally the skipper of the boat will make a decision whether he wants to divert the airplane or take it aboard. Well, blue water ops means that there is no option of divert, so we had to land with just 1 engine. And because it was an extremely hot day, we had to dump a lot of gas and leave us enough gas for 2 attempts at landing, and if we couldn't have gotten aboard on the second try, we would have had to turn around and come in and barricade. That was pretty exciting, and as it turns out, it was a legitimate fire light, so shutting the engine down right away was the right move. And we trapped on the first one. It was a fairly decent pass. You always remember when something like that happens, everybody in the ship knows what's going on.
Towards the end, we did start doing some what we call them hot boxes or whatever, and this was basically going and getting a 60 by 60 mile area, and we were told that we were allowed to drop on pretty much anything that was in there. We used our air-to-ground radar to pick up bright returns. We would know from intel prior to launch where there might be artillery batteries or tank concentrations, and once we had that, we would compare our radar lock to our forward-looking infrared pod and be able to get a visual pick day or night on what we were dropping, and then we'd release our ordnance.
We had several F-18s, I should say several, 4 actually hit overseas. They were all hit by heat-seeking missiles, and all 4 of those airplanes were flying again within 2 days. They all flew back to our home base, which was about 250 miles from the battlefield, and 3 of those 4 flew back on 2 engines. The other one came back single engine.
The air-to-air mission is much more intense. Getting geared up for an air-to-air hop, let's say a 4-ship versus many or unknown out there, you've got a lot on your mind. There are so many things you need to do, and you're really on your toes the whole time. With a strike mission, there's not so, everything's kind of laid out. You have a certain timeline you're on, you have a target, you know where you're going, you have a destination, you have some en route time there where you may not have to be as quite on your toes as you do in an air-to-air mission. Of course, depending upon the enemy threat, but I'd have to say definitely that in the F-18, at least for me, the air-to-air mission is more difficult, more demanding.
Most of the missions flown from the ship end up staying over water almost entirely. And there are some, especially blue water, operating in the Atlantic, where, I mean, you never see land. You take off, you can fly for 600 miles and never see land.
When we launch, normally we go to in the ASW, which is anti-submarine warfare mission. We go out alone and look for submarines, or we might be working with a surface ship that has that's an ASW ship, or some of the ASW helicopters. Now in the ASUW, which is anti-surface warfare, we would go out as the tip of the spear, so to speak, and find the bad guys and continue to provide the targeting information, and we could do that by ourselves with another S3, or lead the strike package, which could be F-18s or A-6s against other ships. But more and more with this new radar that we have, we find ourselves being the ones that are tasked to go out there and
within 10 miles of the ship, you have to be talking to the tower. At 10 miles, we'll call what's called a CU. We'll just say CU at 10, and they can hear it on the ship. They're not going to reply. They just say, okay, they know that we see them, and we're basically acknowledging that we see the ship and we're at our pre-assigned altitude. From there, we'll come in, say the A6s are at 2,000 feet in this air wing. So we'll be at 2,000 feet. There may be other A6s out there. If there are, I'll try and join on them. That'll expedite the recovery because it's easier to come in as a flight of 2 or a flight of 3 or 4 rather than coming in one at a time. Once the landing area is clear, we'll start to prepare the flight deck for the recovery. We'll descend down from 2,000 feet, hit an initial point 3 miles behind the ship at 800 feet, and then press inbound to the overhead, we'll call it as the break. They come in at 800 feet, paralleling the ship's course.
The pilot comes in overhead the ship and somewhere forward of the bow usually. He'll execute a hard 180-degree turn, which he pulls the power back to idle, puts the speed brakes out, and starts slowing the airplane down. Performs a 180-degree turn at 800 feet. Wings come out, the landing gear comes down, the flaps come down. Then he slows to 150 knots and turns to the downwind heading, descends to 600 feet, which is what our pattern altitude is in the ship. Once he approaches the bow of the ship, he'll slow from 150 knots down to whatever the optimum airspeed is for his particular aircraft. And the F-14 is around 130 to 135 knots, depending on your fuel weight. And then you'll be slowing, you'll be at that airspeed. Once you get to the stern of the ship, then you'll start your approach turn. Starting at 600 feet, about 130 knots, you maintain that airspeed pretty much throughout the turn. Then you just start a 180-degree turn around to land at the ship. And there are little checkpoints that each pilot has. Fly a nice proper pattern. You've gone to 90 degrees of turn, you're at about 450 feet. And as you start crossing the wake of the ship and coming over to the extended center line of the flight deck there, you should be about 325 feet. And the whole time you're maintaining this optimum airspeed to wind up with what we call the beat ball right in the center on lineup and on the proper airspeed. From the time you're rolling out on final, which naval aviators call rolling in the groove, everything, you're shooting to have the beat ball in the center, the airplane on speed and on lineup, and then you just fly your approach all the way down until you hit the flight deck and go to full power.
As you're flying down the glide slope, obviously the ship is moving away from you, so to keep your ground speed effectively the same, we'll raise the glide slope angle, but under normal conditions, which is about 20 to 30 knots or so, 35 knots of wind, we'll go with a 3.5 degree glide slope. Once we get up to 37 to 40 knots or more on the wind, we'll go to a 4-degree glide slope. Your hook is required to clear the ramp with 10 feet minimum. Most carriers now have about a 12-foot ramp clearance when you cross it. The general distance that we target for an Nimitz-class carrier like we did on the Roosevelt or the Lincoln is the 3-wire, and that's targeted 230 feet from the ramp. The distance between each wire is about 40 to 45 feet.
The wire pays out about 380 feet. As soon as it pays out, you'll come back to idle, and you'll get the kind of that momentum will make you roll back about 2 feet. You'll get a signal from the deck coordinator to raise your hook, and then he'll tax you out of the way. And we try to make an interval in the daytime of every 45 seconds we're landing an aircraft on the carrier, and then at night they try to make the intervals about 1 minute and 30 seconds.
On a certain carrier, you might have to pull some power off at a certain point, where on another one you might have to put it on. But once you touch down and roll out, they're all pretty much about the same. Obviously, some of them have a lot less flight deck than others, like being on the Coral Sea. You roll out, you'd be looking out at the water, right away, and it's, that was an eye-opener the first time we did that. But on the bigger ships, you touch down, or you cross the ramp, you're going to land. It seemed and then when you do roll out, you know, you have a lot of space left, so and that's noticeable.
I have about 500 traps. Over 200 of those are at night, and I can tell you one thing, not one of them was fun.
You know, at 2 a.m., pitch black, there's no moon, and it's bad weather. The deck's kind of moving a little bit, and you've got a guy out there on the bow with two little wands, and he's trying to get your nose wheel 6 inches from the bow and turn you in a 180-degree turn to park you after you've just had a 2-hour flight and your legs are shaking from the landing. So I'd have to say that almost the scarier part of the flight is the taxiing around the bow afterwards, and I think there's a lot of guys that would agree with that.
No matter if you're a admiral in the Navy and you're flying behind the boat or whatever, you're always graded. Every pass is graded. And that pass, not only is it graded, but it's posted where the entire world can see it.
Fortunately, our whole job, flying's only part of it. I mean, that's, you know, a Navy pilot is only part pilot. He's all naval officer.
There is nothing like an aircraft carrier that's operational. It's kind of like magic. And when you're doing flight ops and you get a chance to be involved in that, there's nothing quite as magical. You work long hours, you work hard. Every guy on the boat has something that he's got to do, and he works hard at it. And when it comes together, you can't beat it anywhere in the whole world. And I think that's what keeps us going. For aviators, there's no greater challenge than landing on a ship. It's by far the ultimate challenge, and it's a real good feeling when you can go out and do it.
The carrier is a complex and difficult environment that requires of its crews coordination, concentration, and discipline. The tactical advantages gained by the mobility of the carrier ultimately come down to the pilot. For that pilot, the training is continuous, the margin of error slim, and the need for readiness constant.